Good evening, hope this finds you well. I'm doing a personal project on the Battle of Bannockburn and I like to walk around the battlefields and trying to take in things for myself, but sometimes it's not possible. It's dark or cold or rainy, so I like to go on a virtual walk. So I'm going to do that this evening, and if you would like to join me, that would be great, and perhaps you could add some comments in about the things I don't know or would like to know. So I am here on the National Library of Scotland georeference maps. It's a great resource and it's free to anybody that's interested in this kind of stuff. And I can go through an older map of the Bannockburn and Stirling area and look at what it was like before all the development has taken place. And it lets me see in my mind's eye about how conditions may have been back in 1314. You know, when you take all the houses, the buildings and the factories away. It's a great resource to do that. So here I am on the National Library of Scotland site and I'm looking at Ordnance Survey map 1888 to 1915. So it's just at a period where the expansion of Stirling and Bannockburn is just beginning to take place, but there's still plenty rural areas and arable farmland, and we can walk around this virtually, and we can also phase it up and bring in what it's like today. So we can get the contrast between what it was like in the 1800s and even more sparsely in the medieval time and to what it's like today. So let's take a wee walk and see what we can find of interest as we follow the route that the invading English army would have taken as they came up to Bannockburn to fight King Robert the Bruce. Ostensibly they came up to relieve Stirling Castle, and they started, as they came up from this direction from the Falkirk area, on towards Stirling Castle. Now they may have came along a part of the Roman road, and certainly they would have came in to this area of the Milton Ford to cross it. So let's just have a wee look at this area where they've come in here. On the map, this 1888 map, you can see that they've mapped the Roman road in. Now I know parts of that have been found. There's been archaeological studies that have found parts of it further up. I think this must just be a representation of where they think it might be, but we certainly know it was in this area. And what kind of condition was that in 1314, and did the English use it as part of their advance into Scotland? I'm sure if it was in any kind of reasonable condition, they would have used it. You can see where it crossed the Bannockburn here, just on the map, just to the left of the Milton Ford. Now, this is quite a gorge-like area in here. It's quite a ravine, and it would be difficult to get a bridge across there. But the Romans were excellent engineers, and I'm sure if they had wished to do so, they would have got a bridge across there. Was that still in place in 1314? Well, we don't hear anything about it, so you've got to kind of presume that perhaps it wasn't. So that would mean that the English troops would probably have to cross at the Milton Ford here, as you can see it here, or further up where the Bannockburn the banks flatten out again on the Bannockburn, and we'll show you that later on in the film. So just looking at the Milton Ford here, it's great to see these names: Beatson's Mill, the Flour Mill, the disused mill here, quite a number of mills in that area, wasn't there? And interestingly, a curling pond as well in the 1800s. Now I doubt if that was there in medieval days, but goodness knows, wouldn't it have been great if they could sort out their differences with a game of curling instead of a major battle. There you go. And I'm quite interested, just when I scan around the map, to see the amount of old shafts, air shafts and old shafts. And you'll notice that as I scroll around the map. There's an old trial shaft there, another old shaft down here. There's another one. My goodness. It must be like a rabbit warren under there with all the old mines. It's quite incredible to see it marked up like this. However, let's get back to the route that the English army would have taken. In all probability, their advanced guard on the first day of the battle would have crossed at the Milton Ford here and taken this road, or somewhere in this direction, area, up towards Stirling Castle. Now, let me just widen this out a wee bit to show you where we are. There's Charters Hall, which is another possible crossing place, and the Milton Ford. Here's the road, the modern road up through the Winds of Milton, and here is the line as shown on this map of the old Roman road. So you can see they're all kind of going in the same direction. So you'd imagine that given today an ancient road and a modern road take this route up towards the castle, that the English would not have been too far from this kind of area either as they advanced onto the castle. So they've come up in this direction here. And interestingly, if I just, in this area here, if I just fade up the modern map, you'll see coming through there the National Trust for Scotland, Bannockburn Heritage Centre. There's King Robert the Bruce, the Rotunda and the Visitor Centre. And the Roman road goes right through there. So when you go up to visit this place, you're walking in the footsteps of Roman soldiers and engineers. How fascinating is that? History is magnificent. And if you go and speak to them in there, they'll tell you that the Halbert's Bog and the Milton Bog shown here were effectively protecting the flank of the Scottish army, which would have been somewhere in this area, to oppose the English. They were opposing them getting up to the castle. And that would be a difficult area for English cavalry to cross. The horses get bogged down in this area and it would be really difficult to defend themselves. So it was quite a barrier. They'd maybe have to go further round on this side, or as we'll see later, further round on this side. So interestingly on this map, you can see they've marked the Battle of Bannockburn 1314 here. So if I just pan out, you'll get a better perception of where this is. So there's Gillies Hill and there's Coxet Hill. So two areas that some historians believe were involved in the battle. And if I just fade up the modern map, you'll see what's there now and how it's been developed. So here's Coxet Hill with the housing estate on it, and Gillies Hill and the modern motorway running right through the middle there. Now if you go up to Coxet Hill, even today you get a magnificent view across to the castle up in this direction and a magnificent view down to the carse. And I'm quite sure Robert the Bruce would have had lookouts up there because it's a magnificent vista and you would see the enemy coming from miles around. So I'm quite sure he would have utilised Coxet Hill as a lookout. Let me just fade that back to where we were. Now as we know, we just discussed that the English were advancing up this road towards St Ninians and then on towards the castle. But they were confronted by a Scottish force and a sharp action took place and the English were effectively pushed back. De Boon, the English knight, was killed here by Robert the Bruce, somewhere in this area, and the vanguard, their leading cavalry, were effectively pushed back over the Bannockburn by the Scots. But at the same time, another group of English cavalry, about 300 of them, had come round to try and outflank the Scots around here. Now where would they have come up? Where, and what were they doing? Were they coming in to outflank the Scots and coming behind them? Or, as some people say, were they coming in to get behind and then carry on up to the castle to relieve it, to keep their part of the deal where it must be relieved by Midsummer's Day? Well, whichever way you believe, you've got to realise that the English did come round here and they would need to come up from a flat carse up quite an undulating area here Balquidderock would have a 30-degree slope, and here we've got quite a undulating area, and the cavalry, like anybody else, would probably try to take the easiest way up. So let's just zoom in and have a look. There's St Ninian's Church there, the old church. So let's fade it up, see what we're talking about here. So there's the old St Ninian's Church. Now, if you look, even today, and going on the basis that new roads tend to follow the route of old roads, simply because they've chosen the easiest access and egress. If you look at Shearer's Brae here, it threads its way down onto the carse, avoiding all these undulations, which are difficult to see on a 2D map, but these are quite undulating hills and would be difficult for cavalry to climb over. They would take the easy route, so they would go up Shearer's Brae perhaps, or if you come further round this way, they would go down Broom Road. Although I'm sure there wasn't a Broom Road sign in 1314, but you know what I mean. They would have come up, avoiding all these undulating areas that might slow them down or lead them into a trap. They would have taken the easy route up and then on towards the road up to Stirling. So what happened here is that as they were going round to try and outflank the Scots or get up to Stirling, they were spied by Thomas Randolph, a Scottish knight, who rushed to meet them. Now I believe he rushed down to meet them on the carse and stopped them getting up. And there was a sharp action fought there, and they were routed. The English were routed from the field. Some continued on up towards the castle and escaped, and most part of them headed back to the main body of the English army. Others believe that the English actually got up from the carse onto the top part here, and as we'll see as we continue up the road, there are named places that may indicate that some of them may have done so. So as I say, here they could have come up the Shearer's Brae or the Broom Road area. It's two easy ways up for cavalry to get up off the carse. They would have passed in the vicinity of St Ninian's if they were continuing up towards the castle, or they could have tried to have come round towards the back of the Scots. Now, given that we know that that didn't happen, and they didn't get outflanked, that's why I think they were contained down on the carse somewhere. However, let's continue our little virtual walk. As we continue up past St Ninian's, and we go up the road here, let me just pan that back out again. You can see, even in the 1800s, this is all arable land. There's no great building has taken place or development has taken place. It's just beginning to get a lot of development happening, but at the moment it's still a very rural area. So as we continue up this road, we come to Randolph Field, Clifford Park. Clifford, of course, being the name of an English knight, and Thomas Randolph being the name of the Scottish knight who routed the English from the field on the first day. So it's interesting that, you know, names mean a lot in history. They're not just put there for nothing. I don't know when these were attributed to this area, but there is something else which gives an indication that something significant happened in this area. So let me just pan up the new map. Isn't that magnificent? And you can see how all these agricultural areas are now being urbanised. They've all been developed and built upon. And if I just zoom in to Randolph Field, this is the old police headquarters, Central Scotland Police were in this area here. And interestingly, if you zoom in here, in this area, there are a number of standing stones. And some people believe these standing stones were put there and attributed to the Battle of Bannockburn in commemoration of Randolph's defeat of the English. And other people believe they've been there even longer and they were there to signify something else, or perhaps have even been moved there from somewhere else. Who knows? But certainly they're there to signify something specific. We're just not quite sure what. But it could be something to do with Bannockburn. So there you go. You can see the development that's taken place all around the day one area of the battle. Let me just pan that back, give you a view. Look at the areas here of all these open fields. And of course back in 1314 it would be even less developed than you see here in this 1800 maps. It's fascinating to see. And the names, as we said, Randolph Field, Clifford Park, Livy Lands, St Ninian's Church, which was previously called Errol Church. It's been there for a long, long time, and is very significant, as the church would have served the whole of Stirlingshire, Gargunnock, Larbert, Kingham-Muirs, a very, very wide area. So it was a significant church, and I believe they would have played a part in the aftermath of the battle with the dead bodies. They would have been organising the burial of these bodies, and of course there would have been a payment for doing so, I'm sure. Anywhere there's a payment, you'll find the church are quite willing to do the job, and they would have taken care of a lot of the dead bodies, I'm quite sure. So there's St Ninian's. So let's just go back down. As we say, we know that the outflanking manoeuvre was defeated and sent packing, and those that came right up the main road were defeated and sent packing. So let's just head back to where we were. There's the Roman road as it crosses the Bannockburn again, and we come back to the Milton Ford, which you see here. So the rest of the English army coming up here, they'd seen their colleagues defeated on 2 occasions on day one, and they decided, we've had enough of that, we've got a bloody nose, let's go down onto the carse, get some lunch, and we'll convene battle the next day. So they've probably gone up the Cat Craig area here. And remember, of course, there's 20,000 of them, and they are in charge of carts pulled with horses and oxen. It's a slow-moving, difficult baggage train on this undulating ground. So they've got to take the easiest route down onto the carse. Now, the closer you are to the Bannockburn, it's obviously very gorge-like in this area, so they're not going there. They're going to take the easiest route. And as I said before, new roads tend to follow the route of the old roads, which had to be accessible and easy to drive for horse and cart, or oxen and cart. So I'm sure the English would have come down this area here, perhaps down by the side of Greenyards here, which is the least significant part of the slope, because we're still up on the high land of the carse here, if you like. And then they're trying to get down onto the carse. So let me just phase that up. You can see now how all that arable place has been built on with housing. There's Greenyards there. And there's a modern day road going round the least significant part of the slope. And I'm quite sure that the English would have taken a similar route as they came down with their heavily laden carts to try to get down onto the carse lands here. Now, why did they need to get down there? Well, they needed fresh water for their oxen and their horses and their men, and they have it in abundance down here, and they have a kind of level of protection. Now, what side of the Bannockburn did they go down? I'm sure that they would have been on both sides, to be honest. I'm quite sure they would have been on both sides, but we'll go down further and have a look here. But let's have a look at this area here. We can see the Braehead area, housing area of Stirling, and the Balquidderock Wood here. This is a 30-degree slope up here, so it'd be difficult for cavalry or carts to traverse up and down here. Here's Skeoch Farm in this area, and there is a ford here in the vicinity of the railway bridge. You can see the rail bridge going over here. So it's possible that they've crossed over here onto the flat carse land. Now we know from research done by Richard Tipping for Stirling University that the area at the bottom of the slope here was quite sodden and marshy. Round about here, Skeoch, it would have been quite marshy and peaty. But the further you get into the carse, the better the ground gets. Surprisingly, the closer to the Forth you get, the better the ground gets, the harder it gets. And we know that the fight took place on a firm, hard field, as described by John Barber. So let's just pan back to the old map and see what we're looking at here. Oh, here's Skeoch. Here's the railway and the ford here where they can get across. Here's the orchard farm, which is no longer there, just some ruins left there now. But I tried to make links, and you wonder if there was dead bodies buried anywhere in this area. As we know, they were buried in pits on the battlefield, according to John Barber. Why would there be an orchard down on the carse, which you'd presume isn't the most fertile of ground in this area, if it's been peaty and marshy? You just wonder. They did find some skeletons under an orchard at Waterloo. Sometimes you make these crazy little links and it gets your mind thinking, doesn't it? But who knows? And what else do we have here? Redhall Farm, Kilnose on this side of the Bannockburn, and Millhall, Carse Mills and Crook Works, which are important areas to the Battle of Bannockburn. Here we can see Millhall Road, the zigzag road, and alongside it, this is a Pell Stream burn, as it goes into its confluence with the Bannockburn here, which is an interesting area because that has now changed course, which I will show you. Now it's marked on here as a mill lade, but it's not, it's a Pell Stream burn, which comes back here and it ties in with the town burn here. As you can see, this is a Pell Stream burn and it comes all the way down here into its confluence. Now let's see how that's changed over the years. As you can see, if I just zoom in on this, you can see how the Bannockburn, when it goes past the Crook Works, takes this big loop and then comes back on itself as it winds its way down to the estuary at the River Forth. But with the modern development of the A91, you'll see how that's changed. There you go, you can see the A91 coming through. And note that the Bannockburn here now no longer has this big loop around an area called Ingram Wood. It just goes straight through there now, doesn't it? And then down to the Forth. So obviously in the building of the A91, this part of it's been chopped off. So we see a change in this area from what would have been there back in 1314. And just talking about this area, at this confluence, if the battle, which most people agree took place between the Pell Stream and the Bannockburn, this would have been crucial to the battle area. It could have been part of where the English camp was, protected on one side by the Bannockburn and the other side by the Pell Stream, or it could have been an area where part of the rout took place as the English tried to flee in all directions. But to my mind, this is core to the battle of this day 2 of the Battle of Bannockburn, this area. But regrettably, we're going to lose that to the development of a superstore and a car filling station and car showroom. And I just feel that the development in this area now is beginning to impinge on areas integral and crucial to the core of the Battle of Bannockburn. And it's a travesty, in my mind, that we're going to lose this area. There is an archaeological study has been done on it, and we're looking to get the results of that. So that would be quite interesting. It'd be great if they found something. But after all these years, we know the difficulties that exist in doing so. However, let's have a wider look at the area again. So here's the area between the Pell Stream and the Bannockburn. And most commentators would agree that the battle took place in this area. Here, dominating the centre of it today, is the remnants of the old Paul Mays pit. That dominates the centre of the battlefield. but we know that the English were pushed onto the Bannockburn, and many of them met their fate there, one way or another. So it's likely that this was certainly integral to the battle itself. So let's just go back and see what it was like back in the day. You can see the Spring Carse area is all agricultural, all these open fields here, and it would be quite a significant area. And it's so much easier to see it on the older maps when you take away the development. You can see in your mind's eye what might have taken place, or you can certainly try to visualise what might have taken place. So it's very, very interesting. And I always like to look at the old place names, because often in the place names there are clues. I haven't found any really in this area which points a finger as to say, I was here, this is where the battle was. But we never stop looking. It's exciting to do so. So I hope you have enjoyed this gentle walk, virtual walk, through the Stirling and Bannockburn area, and we'll continue in our quest to find out every aspect of the battle we can. If you've enjoyed this, go into the National Library of Scotland website, pick up a map. You can also get the LiDAR map, which shows you the underlying topography of the land, and that's fascinating to look at, and is a great resource for archaeologists. Just to give you an idea of how helpful these maps can be, if you look at the Crook Works here, obviously there were buildings here back in the 1800s. I don't know how long before that, but they're not there today. However, they have left the ghostly imprints of a footprint of the buildings that were there. This is just an arable field now, but the foundations must have changed the minerality of the soil, and you can see a ghost, a shadow of what was once there. So it just shows you how valuable these maps can be in identifying changes in the ground from many, many years ago. Quite fascinating. And the LiDAR one is even more helpful at times. And in times of severe drought in the summer, these areas tend to show up even better. So if you can get aerial photographs after a drought, they could be very revealing about what's happened in certain areas on the battlefield. So there you go. As I say, let's just once again have a look. If we take a wider scan, Gillis Hill, Coxet Hill, Milton Ford, Spring Carse, the Battle of Bannockburn, Day 2 area. And if we just fade back to the old map from the 1800s, you'll see it much more like it would have been back in the day. All these open fields here certainly opens it up in the mind's eye, doesn't it? As I say, I hope you've enjoyed this little virtual walk. Take care and have a good evening.